Welcome back, everyone. Today is September 11th, 2024. The debate was last night. Let me know what your thoughts on that were in the comments. But I wanted to make a bit of a different video today, and I want to talk about the Silver Bulletin. So, of course, the Silver Bulletin is Nate Silver's new prediction website after he left 538 fairly recently. And I wanted to talk about the polling numbers that he's showing and his polling averages and how he gets them. So let's start with this. On the national, he has Kamala Harris up by 2 points. In Arizona, he has the exact opposite of that, and he has Donald Trump up by 2 points. In Florida, he has Trump up by 4 points, 5 points. In Georgia, he has Trump up by 0.7 points. In Michigan, he has Kamala Harris up by 1.4 points. In Minnesota, he has Kamala Harris up by about 7 points. In Nevada, he has them tied. In New Hampshire, this state isn't really going to matter, but he has Kamala Harris up by 6.2 points. In North Carolina, Kamala Harris up by 0.1. In Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris up by 0.3. In Texas, Trump up by about 6 points. Virginia, Kamala Harris up by 7.5 points. And in Wisconsin, he has Kamala Harris up by 2.2. So this is all reflected here. He shows you the margin of all the states that are going to be somewhat competitive. Here's some extra ones. Nebraska's 2nd district, Montana. These aren't states that really are going to be competitive these. It's just because they've been polled. But let's see his poll breakdown so you can get a bit of an idea what I'm talking about. So let's talk about Arizona first. So he includes this poll from Tip Insights, which has Kamala Harris up by 0.2 points. And okay, so this one has a 1.12 influence, and it was conducted from the 3rd to the 5th of September. So, okay, so now we have polls below that from the 6th of September to the 9th of September. That one has less influence than the Tip Insights poll. That doesn't really make much sense. And the Morning Consult poll as well. Morning Consult, I'm sure if you follow polls, you know, is a very reputable pollster. And it seems a little bit weird to me that Morning Consult polls will be lower than other polls despite being conducted later. The same thing goes for this Insider Advantage poll. Here's a poll from September. Now there's a poll from August here. These have about the same amount of influence, yet this poll is much older. Also, this is a pollster that isn't really as reliable, so that probably explains some of that. But at the same time, let's go to the second page. Here's a poll from YouGov that ended on the 3rd. This one has a 0.44 influence. Now, I'm not sure how this is calculated, but this adjustment seems very arbitrary because Emerson College, Redfield and Wilton, again, Redfield and Wilton, and Morning Consult are really going to be the ones that you want to look for in the state of Arizona in terms of the polls. Yet they're being organized in a way that prioritizes the polls that are closer versus the polls that are not. So let's look at this. Let's go to Michigan. Michigan has the number one poll in terms of influence is from YouGov, and that poll has a margin of 1 point. The second poll is from Co/Efficient, and that one has a margin of 0 in either direction. And both of those ended on the 6th of September. Now, if you go to the Morning Consult poll here and the Redfield and Wilton poll here, both of them have a margin of about 3 points, yet they have less influence than the YouGov and the Coefficient poll, even though they ended later. And we can see here clearly that sample size doesn't matter. This one had a bigger sample size than the YouGov poll and the Coefficient poll. They're just ranked lower. And if you go over here, he includes a poll from Trafalgar Group, which is considered to be kind of iffy when it comes to polling. Here's another YouGov poll. YouGov is a more reliable website than Trafalgar Group, yet ranked lower. The same thing goes for Patriot Polling. Pretty small pollster, but it's closer. It's closer to making the race competitive than these polls here, the Redfield and Wilton poll and the YouGov poll. This one has 0.10 less influence than the Glenn Gariff Group poll, which is also a fairly small pollster based in Lansing. Yet Redfield and Wilton is a much more reliable pollster, ranked lower. If you go back here, these polls don't really matter that much, but this is a pretty big discrepancy. The same thing goes for Wisconsin. We see the same thing. Marquette University Law School is one of the best pollsters in the state. This one has less influence than the YouGov poll, despite the fact that they ended at the same time. The same thing goes for the coefficient poll here. This one's even. This one has more influence. The Redfield and Wilton poll, the Morning Consult polls, all of these polls that find the election closer get pushed up, and the polls that don't get pushed down. See, here you can find this Emerson College poll from the 28th being up pretty high, yet this poll from YouGov going down below, this poll from Redfield and Wilton having much like half the influence that the Emerson College poll has, despite the fact that they were conducted at around the same time. Let's go to Pennsylvania. Again, you have YouGov here, coefficient here, Morning Consult here, Redfield and Wilton here, despite the fact that these two ended before these two. The time at which they were published should not matter. What matters is the dates in which the voters were surveyed. But I guess that doesn't really matter that much if the polls aren't that close, which is kind of the trend that I'm picking up on here. Here's a YouGov poll, D+2. This poll was ended after the Trafalgar Group poll, yet it has less influence. The Redfield and Wilton poll, about the same time as Trafalgar Group, less influence. Emerson College, it's even closer, more reliable pollster, that one makes sense. But why is YouGov being pushed below Trafalgar Group? Why is Redfield and Wilton being pushed below Trafalgar Group and Emerson College? These are polls that don't really have that much weight. But I think the point here is kind of important. Let's go on over into, we already did Wisconsin. Let's go on over into North Carolina. These are the new polls. In North Carolina, these are the new polls. Here's a poll from Survey USA. Here's a poll from Quinnipiac University. Here's a poll from Morning Consult. Here's a poll from Florida Atlantic. And here's a poll from Redfield and Wilton. Now, this one actually lines up with what you would imagine that it would look like, because these polls were conducted later. These polls go in a major direction, so these are going to be more important when you consider the polling averages. But at the same time, these are just the polls that go against the trend. They tighten up the race. Before that, you have all of these Trump polls, yet these are the ones being pushed to the top, when in the other states, it's the other way around. I get the feeling that these polling averages are being skewed to make them as tight as they possibly can be without looking as suspicious. But again, the polling average in North Carolina is 0.1. So here it is. Here it's going to be on this, on here. It's 0.1 in Kamala Harris's direction. Yet all of these polls are just being pushed down just to balance it out, I guess. Here's Georgia. This poll goes against this poll. This Quinnipiac University poll goes against this Morning Consult poll. And so they're going to be at the top. Okay, that's what you would expect from these types of rankings. A bit of distribution, difference of 4 points between those polls. But then you get to the Redfield and Wilton poll, the Florida Atlantic poll, the Emerson College poll, this Insider Advantage poll, this Patriot polling poll, and this YouGov poll. Let's just talk about these 8 for a second. The YouGov poll ended on the 3rd, and the Emerson College poll ended on the 28th. Why is the Emerson College poll being ranked so much higher than the YouGov poll by 0.20 in terms of his influence calculation? But again, this doesn't really make sense. This Quinnipiac University poll, one of the most accurate pollsters, that one should be at the top. Morning Consult should be at the top. These polls were conducted later, yet they're ranked lower. I'm not making the case here for one candidate or the other. I'm just saying these poll calculations look extremely subjective and, quite frankly, strange. Here's Nevada. All of these polls just pushed back. This poll from Emerson College, this one gets to stick around. This poll from Insider Advantage that ended on the 31st has 0.63, and this poll from YouGov that ended on the 3rd has 0.43. What's the difference? This one tightens up the average. This one, this YouGov poll, does not. This Redfield and Wilton poll, again, this one ended on the 28th. This SSRS poll ended on the 29th. This Morning Consult poll ended on the 26th. There's barely any difference between this Redfield and Wilton poll and this Morning Consult poll and this SSRS poll. But because the average went towards the Democrats, this order pushes it towards the Republicans in Georgia. The opposite is true. Again, this average, if you get just this snippet of polls here, these 3 polls send it towards the Democrats. All of these polls send it towards the Republicans. Then these polls send it towards the Democrats again. So to tighten up the race, you rank them in that order. All of a sudden, all of your polling averages are close, except for Arizona, which, again, weird order for all of these. Let's hop on over to 538 to see what they have to say about these polling averages. So here's their president general election polls. Let's go first to Michigan. Kamala Harris has a 1.8 point lead in Michigan, according to the 538 polls. Yet on the Silver Bulletin, it's 1.4. In Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris has a 0.7 point lead. Yet on the Silver Bulletin, it's 0.3. These polls, again, these are not Trafalgar Group. It's a partisan pollster for the Republican Party. So what I want to know, what I want to clarify is I'm not sure what's happening at the Silver Bulletin. Here's Wisconsin. Nate Silver, 2.2. Kamala Harris on 538, 2.8. It's a pretty big difference when they're using the exact same data. They're using the exact same data. 538 doesn't show us how they weigh, but they're using the same data. There shouldn't be much of a difference between these two polling averages, considering that Nate Silver worked on 538 for so long. And I'm not trying to make any sort of accusation against Nate Silver. I think he's a very pivotal person when it comes to election prediction. But I just want to figure out, really, I do, why are these influence numbers being manipulated to make the polling averages as close as they possibly can? Again, Nevada, all of these polls that are being pushed up, it doesn't matter when they were commissioned, it doesn't matter when they were performed. All that matters is that they're moving the average closer to 0. All of the polls that find Kamala Harris up are pushed down, and all of the polls that find Donald Trump up are pushed up. So what happens is you end up with 0. In North Carolina, these polls, they're getting pushed up because these polls were polls that found Donald Trump up, so they get pushed back. And the polls that find Kamala Harris up get pushed forward. He's confirming the other polls, which is introducing bias into his model. And I think that that's an issue. I'm not sure why that is the case. I'm aware that Nate Silver has ties to a election betting platform called Polymarket, so I'm not sure how much that has to do with it, but these numbers are clearly being manipulated. They're clearly being manipulated to make the election look closer than it should. So thank you for watching today's video. I know today was a bit of a different video, but I just wanted to really get this video out there because I know that Nate Silver is, again, like I said earlier, he's a very important figure in terms of election prediction, but I can't get my head around why he would do a method like this that is so subjective. Again, there's a clear trend here. His model, I don't know if he does it personally, I don't know if he has a model that does it, but this model is making the election look closer than what the polls would suggest by changing the influence and changing the order until it finds a good number that isn't exactly representative of the direction in which the polls are going. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure to hit like and remember to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.